Roxbury. I was elected on June 3rd.
Well,
Thanks.
hello, I'm Tom Fanning. I'm the new representative from Pelham. And this is my second go-round with school committee. I was on the school committee a long time ago. I don't exactly remember when, but it was back in the late 80s and early 90s. So I'm happy to be back.
Welcome.
I think.
You're sweet. All right, so we have approval of minutes. I'm going to assume that not everybody had the chance to look them over. Or did everybody have the chance to look them over? Because they weren't there at 4 o'clock.
No.
All right. Go ahead.
So, yes, we should give people more chance to look them over, but so the March 21st minutes look incomplete, like they list the executive session and then there's nothing else. And I looked back to see if that's all we did that meeting, but it's not. There we had a whole agenda, March 21st. And then the March 28th minutes, I have the same comment as possibly last time, or maybe it was a different meeting, I don't remember, a different committee, that it'll say things like so-and-so commented, or so-and-so questioned, or so-and-so answered, but not the substance of the comment or the question or the answer. I wanted to suggest that maybe we suggest to the minute taker that she look over some previous minutes from our previous minute taker who did such a great job, and I'm blanking on her name. Maylene did a great job. And perhaps our minute taker could look at some of Maylene's minutes to see what we typically expect and hope to see in the meeting minutes.
Yep, that's fair. So we'll table that for now. We'll move to public comment for folks who are present. You can step up. You have 3 minutes for public comment, and the floor is yours. Oh, do you have the written? You have the written?
Hello. My name is Alicia Lopez. I'm a teacher at the middle school and a parent of 3 kids who went through the Amherst system. I'm here to read a letter from the APA that I think you might already have seen. On May 16th, the APA presented the committee with a letter of no confidence in Superintendent Michael Morris and Assistant Superintendent Doreen Cunningham, enumerating the concerns we have about their leadership. Since that meeting, we have heard no updates about what steps the school committee is taking to investigate and take action with regards to our verified collection of claims. This is a matter of great concern to Amherst Regional Public Schools, as shown by the 80% of staff who voted in favor of this letter. We understand that the Title IX investigation is still underway. However, that investigation was started based on a complaint from parents and does not address all the points enumerated in our vote of no confidence letter. We ask that the school committee employ an independent investigator to look into our verified claims of unethical, unprofessional behavior as well. Resolution of this matter is essential to the continued well-being of all Amherst Regional and Amherst school staff. Without a concrete follow-up plan, we believe that staff morale will remain low and educator burnout will remain high. We urge you to take action as soon as possible so that everyone may return to school in August with a feeling of safety in our buildings, and so that we may focus on what we love and do best, educating and caring for our students. We are asking that the school committee provide the APA and the community with a response or an update to this matter on or before July 1st, 2023. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm MJ Schwartz, and I am a parent and step-parent, and I am also a non-binary trans adult speaking out of advocacy for the children who have been abused at our middle school. And I'm speaking today to express my concern that, as far as I know, no further action beyond the ongoing Title IX investigation and placing Doreen Cunningham on leave is taking place to address the far-reaching issues caused by ARP's leadership. My primary concern has always been and always will be the safety and well-being of LGBTQIA+ and other marginalized groups of students. And I'm so thankful to the brave parent who filed the Title IX investigation and also brought this issue to the public's attention by sharing her name in public commentary. However, I'm gravely concerned that all future action seems to be pinned on the outcome of this sole investigation. Let's not forget that the Title IX is about one child. There have been allegations of other children suffering similar abuses at the school, as well as ongoing problems with bullying, teachers and staff who have been subjected to hostile work environments, issues with cronyism and nepotism, and paras living in poverty. These may seem like disparate issues, but they're not. As another member of the public pointed out during public commentary a few weeks ago, most of the people of color employed by the Amherst School District are in janitorial or paraprofessional roles. While racism, classism, homophobia, and transphobia all have their own unique personalities, they are comfortable bedfellows. Where one is spotted, the others are not usually far behind. Historically, these issues are deeply enmeshed with one another and can never be fully teased apart. It's disturbing that all of these issues occurred under the leadership of Mike Morris, and yet there has been no mention of him facing any consequences for his actions and inactions. To top it all off, he lied blatantly and publicly about any knowledge of formal complaints about the counselors at the middle school. As far as the general public knows, Morris will be free to return to his position as soon as he chooses to do so. The Title IX investigation results won't be available until August, is my understanding, and Cunningham's contract is set to renew on July 1st. The issues related to the Title IX are only a fraction of what should be investigated regarding Cunningham's unethical behaviors. If either Morris or Cunningham are allowed to return to their positions, the existing problems will continue and new ones will surely arise. The APEA has voted no confidence in the leadership, including the school committee, for good reason. Many parents and community members who have been treated as problems to be shut down and shut up by certain school committee members have joined that stance of no confidence after watching this process unfold. I'm urging you to commit to repairing the connections that have been broken and to restore the faith of your students, teachers, faculty, staff, and the community members who elected you. It's not too late, but the clock is ticking.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who wishes to step forward and make a public comment?
My name is Laura Hunter. I have a rising 9th grader and an 8th grader at the middle school, and my husband has taught for 16 years at ARMS. I am here to remind the school committee of your responsibility to put the protection of the most vulnerable students first, and to tell you again to follow the APA's demands. The APA voted no confidence in Mike Morris and Doreen Cunningham. The school committee has ignored the vote of no confidence by the APA and ignored the demand for an investigation of Mike Morris and the firing of Doreen Cunningham. Are you hoping we are going to forget and this will just go away? Only Jennifer Shao has put out a personal statement to the community, and while this committee endorsed that statement protecting LGBTQIA+ students, what steps have you taken? Admonishing Ms. Shao publicly for reading public comments aloud, in other words, silencing a woman of color while remaining silent on everything else. You have a mandate from the union, and it is time to act. It is your responsibility to protect our students and support the schools. The dauntless high school students who wrote 2 recent graphic articles have done all the heavy lifting for you. You say we need to wait for the results of the investigation. We don't have to wait for the investigation to finish, to reckon with the corruption in the district. Corruption you let go unabated. Don't tell us you didn't know. We all knew. You have allowed harm to come to the students of ARMS by people who are still drawing salaries. What are you doing right now to repair the damage done? Fire the guidance counselors. Fire the superintendent. Fire the assistant superintendent. Set a clear message that harm to students will not be tolerated here. You have much to answer for. And meeting after meeting with no apology is simply embarrassing for you. Apologize to the educators of ARMS. Apologize to the APA. Do your duty to protect, not the district from liability, that ship has sailed, but to protect all the students. This community will not just sit back and allow Mike Morris to roll back into his job at the end of the summer. The community needs to know what steps you are taking to make sure that the superintendent, vice superintendent, and transphobic guidance staff of, The community needs to know what steps you will be taking to make sure that the superintendent, vice superintendent, and the transphobic guidance staff of ARMS do not return to work in Amherst ever again. How can our children begin to feel safe if the folks who let this happen might come back? What supports will we put into place to help make the Amherst schools actively anti-racist, pro-queer, pro-educator, and student-centered? The Amherst schools have been a place of excellence in education and social justice, and they can be again. It requires resources, transparency, a commitment to paying educators a competitive wage, including paraeducators, and making the hiring practices fair, open, and biased. Again, a month later, I am saying to you, do the right thing.
Thank you.
I'm Allie Wick-Slim. When the most recent graphic article about breaking the silence came out, what struck me about it was how hard people have tried to get the support they needed at ARPS and how impossibly hard that has been for them. Kids whose counselors failed them went to their nurse, who they trusted. The nurse, finding the system she was working within uncomfortable, unable to address staff through Doreen Cunningham, went to upper administrators and was told that there was no way for her to support her students in need, but to go directly through the person responsible for fostering the environment where the harm occurred. So we have kids unable to get help, and we have staff unable to get help. This is how a problem becomes systemic. This is how institutional homophobia and transphobia harm kids. And this is, frankly, why I'm here and why I keep showing up. Because I've been a parent in the Amherst Regional Public School System, and I've been up against those walls of going to every possible person I can find for help and being unable to get help, and it's why my children are not in this district anymore. So I want to be really clear that people do get tired and they give up, and that's what this district relies on. And we can't afford to do that this time because children's lives and safety are at stake. So we have to keep showing up, and we have to keep demanding better for these kids than what they're being offered right now. Staff give up and they move on and they find a district where they can go through channels that they trust and where they have the support that they need. You're going to lose good staff, you're going to lose children if you don't make change, substantive change, and soon. I want you to stop hiding behind waiting for these report findings. You don't need them to make change. There are things that can be done now. I will join the voices asking for you to please start to address substantively this vote of no confidence. You don't need a report to tell you that it's a problem that 80% of your staff don't feel confident in their leadership. That is a problem today. That's a problem right now. And we cannot afford to wait until August to address it. I want you to also address the fact that for all we know, Mike Morris could decide he feels better and return tomorrow. And that would not be a position that would put children or families in a place where they could trust or have confidence in this district. You have Cunningham on suspension. He was as responsible as she is, as her supervisor. How is it that he gets to leave on his terms and she's escorted out of her office and is not here? I absolutely 100% believe she should not be in the district where she can continue to foster this environment that's harmed kids and lost the trust of staff, but neither should he. And it should not be up to him. And it's your job to make that clear. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else?
My name is Jenna Schwartz. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a parent of a rising senior who, and both of my kids went through Wildwood. One of them went to the middle school. And I myself graduated from the high school in 1991. The APEA has issued a follow-up to the Regional School Committee, asking that committee members, quote, employ an independent investigator to look into our verified claims of unethical professional behavior, unquote, as enumerated in the original letter of no confidence issued on May 31st. The follow-up asks for a response by July 1st of this year. Meanwhile, Doreen Cunningham's contract is due to renew on July 1st. And as far as the public knows, Mike Morris could elect to return to his position at any time, as many other people have already said tonight. Looking at the agenda for tonight's meeting, behind you, I see no indication that the school committee is prioritizing, first, acknowledging, and second, investigating the harm and corruption that occurred under Mike Morris's leadership under your watch. No indication of addressing this or even acknowledging it. I want to say I would very much like to be wrong, but if there is any discussion occurring among you, members of the public aren't hearing about it. And the absence of urgency, or at the very least any visible attention to the systemic failures, lends the impression that you are all putting all of your eggs in the Title IX investigation basket. The thing is, the Title IX complaint has to do with a single student who experienced ongoing, life-threatening transphobia at arms. But the conditions that made such a situation possible are much bigger than a single complaint. And it is these that we are still asking you to confront, both in your words and your actions. It is not only misguided to wait to formulate a response to verified abuses of power by district leadership, but it crosses into complicity. As Dr. Michael Barron, a nationally known DEI expert, writes, if there was harm done at your school, people have to think about how they were part of that harm. With the school year over and as we approach the end of the fiscal year, I am deeply concerned about the summer, beginning without hearing how the school committee plans to confront this harm that has occurred at the highest levels of district leadership under your watch. At the very least, why haven't you placed Mike Morris on administrative leave as distinct from his self-directed medical leave? At the very least, why haven't you formulated and issued a clear and courageous response to the APEA letter of no confidence? And at the very least, why haven't you acknowledged that the anti-LGBTQI+ hostility that has been allowed to fester and flourish at arms did not occur in a vacuum? A bigger change needs to occur, and that change needs to start with you, every one of you, and you as a body. Your constituents are still waiting, and this whole community deserves better. Thank you.
Thank you. Oh.
Good evening. My name is Amber Cano Martin. I am the parent of one elementary school child and one rising 7th grader. I'm here tonight to support the APEA in their no confidence vote in the ARPS administration, specifically of Dr. Mike Morris and Doreen Cunningham. In addition to the formal Title IX complaint, there has been an overwhelming amount of evidence, largely brought to light by the high school newspaper, The Graphic, of corruption, nepotism, and most concerningly, anti-LGBTQ bullying by ARMS staff and students that was not addressed, even when the proper channels for complaint were followed by parents. The administration not only failed to do anything to address the problem, but Dr. Morris denied the existence of any specific complaints at a public school committee meeting on April 25th, which was a complete lie. I call for a thorough and independent investigation of Dr. Morris immediately and his placing on administrative leave. I call for the immediate investigation of Ms. Cunningham, and I call for all of you to act on the no confidence vote of our educators to make sure that these things are taken care of. I trust our educators, their good intentions, their desire and their drive to do the best for our children. Let's not forget that in this debacle, they are the only adults who have stood up to protect our LGBTQ youth who are being bullied by kids and teachers hired by Ms. Cunningham. Finally, I would like to request that Mr. Demling apologize, which he has not to my knowledge, for insinuating that these complaints about harm to children were rumors and that they were false. And I would also request that he apologize to Ms. Shao for reading comments aloud at the last meeting. To my knowledge, that is an act of disability justice. It allows the equitable participation of all in a public meeting. Finally, I join in the calls of everyone tonight who asked for a response on this situation by July 1st because of all the time-sensitive things that are happening right now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Amy Cronin DiCaprio. I'm the parent of a rising 8th grader here at the middle school and a rising 4th grader. And I'm a public health expert with a background in healthy relationships in schools with a focus on LGBTQ plus youth. I am here to speak to the urgent need for accountability and transparency on the part of the Regional School Committee in regards to addressing the unsafe and unethical environment at the middle school that has harmed students and undermined the trust of the community. As folks have said tonight, the pending Title IX investigation deals with a single complaint and can't be expected to address the systemic problems that have led the middle school and district leadership to the current public health crisis. And make no mistake, this is a crisis. The most recent data on the mental health of LGBTQ plus youth paints a grim, if unsurprising, picture. 41% of LGBTQ youth have seriously considered suicide in the last year. This body has heard substantial personal testimony over the past few months from your Amherst and Pelham neighbors who have bravely shared their own insight into what it was like for them to grow up as LGBTQ young people and how literally life-saving it was for them to have affirming adults and affirming spaces to support them. The 2023 U.S. National Survey on the Mental Health of LGBTQ Youth found that roughly half of transgender and non-binary young people found their school to be gender affirming, and those youth who did find their school to be a safe space reported significantly lower rates of attempting suicide. At the May 16th school committee meeting, I mentioned an approach called what, so what, now what. What being the understanding of the issue at hand, so what means making sense of the facts and their implications, and now what, of course, means identifying solutions and a course of action. Amherst and Pelham educators and your constituents are asking you, now what? On May 30th, the Regional School Committee unanimously approved Jennifer Shaw's statement, which included a commitment, quote, to taking the concrete actions available within their purview to ensure that such harm does not continue and is never repeated. One Amherst media outlet recently urged residents to pay close attention to which Regional School Committee members aren't actively and urgently working towards change, and to vote those members out in November. This issue must be centered at upcoming school committee meetings and should be done so in open session, not in a closed executive session unless explicitly legally mandated. We are asking you to build and share a concrete plan, one that will take time, vulnerability, and courage. We are asking you to seek the guidance of outside expertise and do the hard work of self-reflection and resisting defensiveness. And we are asking you as a body to act with full transparency, authenticity, integrity, and accountability from this point forward.
Thank you. Is there anyone else with a public comment that wishes to come forward? All right, so we will move on to the superintendent's update.
Are you going to do the voicemail and email comments?
We have or actually, we don't have voicemail. We have the email comments. Can you pull those up?
I don't know that we had any. Do we have any today?
Yeah.
Yep, they're posted.
It's in the board docs posting.
Is there more? Not in the,
In the public comment agenda item for today.
not in the public version of that. And I don't have a login to make it public.
Let me trust.
Do you want me to email it to you, Doug?
Yes, please. It'll be much faster.
What the heck is that?
I love technology. Always have.
I see. Should be there now in the public section.
So, No, you put it in the public section I have up above, so.
Oh.
So advise me at the pace at which you want me to scroll.
Are we reading them out loud?
Can someone read them out loud who hasn't spoken? I'd like to volunteer to read them out loud. So if you would start the timer, please.
Point of order.
It's an accessibility issue, Peter. We have a precedent.
So I'm not the chair, Ben, but I'm just going to advise that we've talked about this explicitly at a previous meeting, and that our policy is not to read public comments unless we, as a body, choose to override our own policy, which has its own procedure.
So for our listeners at home,
What is that procedure, by the way, if we were to choose to do that?
Someone
Someone would have to actually bring it up. Go ahead.
Someone would make a motion to suspend our policy, and then we would vote on it, discuss it and vote on it.
So does anybody have the wherewithal to do that, or?
accessibility.
I move to suspend the policy and read the comments.
Second.
I don't know who won that. We'll say seconded by Jennifer. We'll open it up for discussion.
I'll just say again, I don't support overriding our policy, because when it happens in these kinds of instances of public pressure, and that we shouldn't, that becomes an issue of equitable voice of the public as to whether you feel beholden enough to try and override what our standard policy is. And for many different reasons, at our last meeting, we talked about why it's not appropriate. We have multiple comments tonight in public comment and a written public comment, some from different points of view. And one of the main reasons that all of our committee talked about as a concerning aspect of reading public comment is that the tone of voice when someone reads it can never be fully neutral. This is one of the reasons why it's in our policy. But I won't go into all the other points, but we had fair unanimity on this when we discussed this at our last school committee meeting.
All of us are capable
Anyone
of
else?
hearing words
Go ahead.
and interpreting them.
I appreciate what you're saying, Peter, but everything in my past experience says to me that situations sometimes control protocol, and that those situations are such that you need to override protocol, then you really should do that, and you must do it. I see this situation as being one where the public interest is really great. We are servants of the public. And therefore, we need to take that in consideration. And so, having said that, I am in full support of having these read out loud.
Thank you, Irv. Allison?
I'm not going to vote against it, but I do want to point out that the members of the community that sent in an email as public comment also have the option of calling in and reading it as a voicemail message so that their voice can be heard. And when we have, and whoever it is that reads it aloud does not know the intent of the writer of that message, and is presuming and making an assumption about how they would want it to be read, if they even want it to be voiced read. People make decisions on their own, and we're making an assumption as to what their intentions were when we choose to read them or have somebody read them. Like I said, I'm not going to vote against it, but I do think that it's a point that we need to consider about what the intent of the individual is who sent that in. They chose not to send a voice message. There may be a reason why they chose that, and we don't presume to know that. And by reading it, we're overriding potentially what their intent might have been.
Can I ask a question?
Go ahead.
If you wanted to send in a voice message to be played at the meeting, how does that even happen? Because as a citizen, when I was trying to send a comment in, it didn't seem like there was an option to leave a voicemail message that would be played at the meeting. And if you aren't able to physically attend a meeting, either because of scheduling conflicts or disability, or you can't read, or you're blind, there's no way to get this information other than having someone read it. And so I think that, you know, especially at the one meeting when there was like, I don't even know, 20 pages of comments, it would be impossible to scroll through all of those comments and have everybody actually able to read through them in the speed with which they were being scrolled at the meeting. And so I do believe, out of just, you know, sort of an equity and disability standpoint, that there has to be some accommodation for better displaying or providing the information from the written public comments, or making a more clear way of alerting people that they can leave a voicemail that will be played at the meeting, because that's not obvious right now. And so I think because that is not obvious right now, we should suspend it for this meeting and move forward with reading the comments.
Go ahead.
So I'm Tom Fanning from Pelham. This is my first meeting. I am not familiar with the policy that you're discussing. I originally thought I would abstain on this vote, but I believe that given recent events, that we need to, let me just say that I came here a couple of weeks ago and listened to an awesome, long meeting, which was mostly public comments, and I thought that was extremely healthy for everybody. So I feel that I am in favor of putting aside the policy so that someone can read these. And I have a question: how many of these are there?
There are like 4 tonight. Yeah, so I'm not weighing in either way. I just want to point out that this discussion probably took longer than the public comment will take. But are we ready to vote, or did anybody else want to weigh in? Or all right, so all those in favor? Oh no, that's right. We have somebody on. My bad. Did you want to say anything? Tillman, my bad. You can't see me. My camera's not on.
Ready to vote whenever you're ready.
Tillman's ready to vote. Let's go with the roll call vote. We'll start. Allison.
Allison, aye.
Tom.
Tom Fanning, aye.
Demling, nay.
Irv.
Irv, aye.
Sarah Bess.
Sarah Bess, aye.
Ben, aye. Tillman. It's your chance.
Tillman, aye.
Tillman, aye. Jennifer.
Aye.
Anna, aye.
And it passes. I guess point of order, who do we have read it?
It's up to you.
It's up to me.
Can public comments still be open?
Yes.
So I know my child, I'm William Schur. I have three kids anyway. My youngest one is a rising junior in the high school. My middle one had a lot of special needs, and anytime my kid was in class, they had a dictation kind of thing where the computer would read to him. I don't know why y'all couldn't utilize that. I'm sure the school has that system, because any kid that has, a hard time reading, then they're able to get the computer to read for them, and it's no one's voice, and it's no one's emotions put into it. It's just straight read. I also wanted to say that I went on y'all's procedure about how to make comments. It says, members of the public who would like to submit comments to the committee can do so by joining and speaking in person, sending an email or text message to SBC by leaving a voicemail. It gives the phone number. Regardless of method, the comments need to be submitted by 3 p.m. with the subject listed as public comment. The message should also include their full name and town of residence. Public comments will either be shown on the screen for viewing or played at the meeting for no more than 3 minutes. Nowhere does it say if you call in and leave a voicemail, your voice can be heard, or does it say if you send an email, it's not going to be heard. It doesn't say that. So if that's your procedure, update what it says online, because your instructions don't alert the person to say, if you want your voice heard, to then call in. I also would urge y'all to take actions for what's happened at the middle school. We have seen some, but we haven't really seen much. So step up, be there for the kids. Thank you.
Thank you. Jennifer's going to read.
You're going to time me?
Oh, thank you.
Go ahead. Action is Better Than Waiting by Art and Maura Keene. It has been more than a year and a half since parents and staff began to complain about bullying of LGBTQIA+ students at the middle school. It has now been over 2 months since a parent filed a formal Title IX complaint against the middle school. It has been more than 5 weeks since the APEA filed a letter of no confidence in Mike Morris and Doreen Cunningham. It has been more than a month since the Regional School Committee held its first emergency meeting to discuss the debacle. Since then, there have been a lot of public testimony and an avalanche of disturbing detail thanks to stellar investigative reporting from students at the Graphic. And yet, there are still no signs that the remaining leadership has any inclination to act. This embrace of inaction bears considerable responsibility for getting us into this mess in the first place. Tonight, this committee has placed a tepid statement in the packet asserting that they do take these issues very seriously and that they intend to take concrete action. We should ask, as we have at past meetings, when might that happen and why does the school committee not share the sense of seriousness and urgency that the Amherst community has been trying to convey to them? The implication is that they intend, as Peter Demling has previously suggested, to wait until they receive the results of the ongoing Title IX probe. That investigation deals with a single complaint and will address that complaint. We know the problems at ARMS are multiple, substantial, complicated, and serious, and that the Title IX investigation is unlikely to address their scope or variety. The waiting that this committee seems to endorse does nothing to diminish the crisis, to restore faith in the district, or to make the schools safe for kids when they return in the fall. Waiting exemplifies that failure of leadership that plagues our schools. Actions are better than waiting. It doesn't take much imagination to think of things that this committee could do right now to start the process of fixing what is broken in the school and start to reestablish trust with the community that you are charged with serving. And it is troubling that this committee has been unwilling to invest much energy in imagining what they might do, never mind actually doing something. So here are just a few suggestions of things that the school committee might do that are better than waiting. This is hardly a comprehensive list. 1, those who have disparaged people who filed complaints and brought the debacle at the middle school into public view need to acknowledge that they were wrong, that they contributed to the harm experienced by ARMS family and staff, and the need to apologize. 2, put addressing the current crisis squarely at the top of the to-do list, at the top of every RSC meeting agenda, and keep it there until the crisis is wholly resolved and we, the community, have confidence that we can trust the safeguards that will be put in place to ensure that this doesn't reoccur. Fixing the problems and assessing the progress ought to be the #1 item on the agenda of every single school committee meeting for months to come. 3, change the leadership. The indifference of Morris and Cunningham to the harm that they enabled and their obstruction of interventions to address that harm makes them untrustworthy and unredeemable. They should be dismissed and they should be investigated so that their successors will have a better understanding of what went wrong. The district must send a clear message that those engaging in behavior that harms children or that is in violation of the law will be held accountable. 4, restore trust. Bring everything out in the open. No more executive sessions except when mandated by law. Don't even talk about the possibility of bringing Mike Morris back. Certainly not before there are thorough, independent investigations that go beyond the specific Title IX probe. Treat the members of the ARPS community like community, not like adversaries. Trust family and staff rather than disparaging and doubting them. Take every accusation seriously. 5, bring in external school climate counselors to develop a program for transforming. I'll go to the next one. Go ahead. Dear school committee members, as a former employee of the high school, the mother of 2 children who graduated from the district, the grandmother of 2 children soon to enter the system, and a member of the Amherst community, I urge that the school committee not support the automatic renewal of Doreen Cunningham's contract as of July 1st, 2023, and to instead support her being given notice of pending termination. Ms. Cunningham is on administrative leave pending the outcome of the Title IX investigation. However, this investigation is limited in scope to specific complaints related to transphobic and homophobic staff actions at the middle school. These complaints, as well as other related complaints brought by staff, parents, and students, are serious and implicate Ms. Cunningham as the administrator who facilitated the hiring of these employees and established a hostile environment where staff, parents, and students have been afraid to bring their concerns forward or have had their concerns dismissed. The events that have occurred violate 2 goals of the district's mission statement, i.e. goal number 3, quote, make all students feel fully welcome and a part of our schools, regardless of race, social class, gender, culture, language, religion, sexuality, academic success, or physical abilities. And goal number 9, quote, sustain a physically and emotionally safe environment in our schools for students and staff. The fact that such violations of district goals occurred under Ms. Cunningham's leadership of HR and DEI in the Amherst schools should alone be disqualifying. However, it is urgent that other serious concerns about Ms. Cunningham's hiring practices be investigated as the deadline for her contract renewal fast approaches. When I served as science department head, I had access to School Spring and to a candidate's curriculum vitae, references, and answers to the district's required essays. For example, answering how they could contribute to our becoming a multicultural school system. Several teachers in the department, as well as a parent representative, served on each hiring committee, and all members received the applicant's materials. Together, we developed the interview questions to be asked for the particular position. Generally, the principal joined us for interviews. Frequently, candidates would bring a portfolio that we could examine, including such materials as sample lessons and assessments and their connections to the standards, modifications for highly able learners or those with special needs, and perhaps a statement on their teaching philosophy. After references were checked, whenever possible, one or more interviewees would be invited to teach a demonstration lesson, which would be observed by other members of the department. After hearing feedback regarding these observations, the committee would recommend a candidate to the principal for hire. Was this a perfect system? No. For example, perhaps every candidate should have been encouraged to submit a portfolio of work. Were there efforts made to avoid bias? Yes. For example, having a common set of interview questions is a best practice in hiring for a diverse workplace. I agree that we all must continue to learn and grow in the areas of diversity, inclusion, and equity. With this history in mind, I was astounded to learn a few years ago that hiring committees no longer had access to the resumes and supportive materials submitted by applicants as part of their efforts to put their best foot forward. I would have understood members receiving resumes with redacted names and addresses, etc., but members on the hiring committees did not see the resumes at all. Even more concerning was the description in the graphic of a department head who, upon inquiring into the hiring of 2 people in his department, quote, without any formal hiring process and without department head representation, was not answered, but instead accused of racism. How was there no involvement by the department in these hires? No parent input, no opportunities for students to experience being taught. Yeah. Next. June 18th, 2023, to the Amherst School Committee. We are writing to express support for Mike Morris returning as superintendent. His continuity and strength as a leader will not be easy to replace. His expertise, knowledge, and personality are a good fit for our district and have been for 22 years. We are grateful for his presence with the difficult job of being superintendent in Amherst. Many of us did not vote no confidence with Mike in mind. Some of us were not aware of the vote since it happened so quickly and we were not able to participate. Others of us who fully support Mike Morris based on his track record were voting no confidence in other administrative staff. Our support is based on his history and pending any concerning outcomes that we imagine are unlikely. With confidence, Kristen Roeder, Judah Hughes, Lauren Matone, Alvi Borel, Menexi Seckert, Molly Millay, Bobby Jemsek. Going on to the next one. Do you want to restart that? Thank you. Good afternoon, all. Thank you all for your service in what has been a difficult month. I appreciate your collective willingness to work for our schools, students, and teachers in the midst of this crisis. I'm writing with 2 items related to tonight's meeting, the LGBTQ response and BEDH. First, thank you for including updates to the community regarding the LGBTQ+ discrimination at ARMS. I feel disheartened and anxious for action while listening to the last 2 meetings. I was relieved to see this back at the front of the agenda. I hope you will ensure that concrete actions are being taken now to build toward a fall that can be restorative, protective, and uplifting, including a strong student counseling cohort at ARMS. Secondly, I'd like to address the addition of item labeled on BEDH on the agenda. The title itself almost entirely acts against public participation. As an educator with a PhD and a policy geek, I had to Google it to know what would be discussed. I'm sure it was not the intent to hide from the public a discussion on public participation, yet it definitely is the impact. Now that I know what BEDH is, I would like to request that the committee work to make the commenting procedures easy to find and easy to use. Also, less bureaucratic, more straightforward ways to both find the agenda and to comment are important. Plain, clear language and an effort to engage the community in your work would be very much welcome. Perhaps a header on your website and a quick update in each school's PGO newsletter. 1, next week's school committee meeting agenda highlights, 2 to 3 bullets. And 2, a comment here button in a self-organizing form. I also strongly disagree with limiting the overall time of public comment. Some of what got leadership in this mess was a lack of listening. Being heard about our kids and our schools as parents and teachers should not be hard. In addition, for folks who may struggle with low vision or nearsightedness, I believe it would be best practices in terms of accessibility to have written comments read into the record. The request made to the committee to read the comments was a request for an auxiliary service that under the ADA, public meetings should comply with. Only Jennifer Shao was quick enough to catch it, and yet she was criticized for doing so. That's not the healthy collaboration we need on the committee or the level of inclusion Amherst as a town wants. I'd recommend reviewing a public meeting's accessibility guides and checklists to review your rules. One example below. You may be able to prevent the creation of committee rules that may violate ADA and definitely leave some folks out. Thanks for listening and for your hard work on behalf of Amherst School children and youth. Sincerely, Dr. Bridget Himes, Amherst resident, ARHS parent. Dear members of the ARP school committees, as an Amherst resident and parent and grandparent to Amherst residents, I thank you for taking action last month on behalf of our LGBTQ+ students. I write now to ask that you take immediate action to ensure that no contracts be renewed for Michael Morris and Doreen Cunningham while investigations are underway related to hiring practices, staff supervision, district-wide morale, and treatment of LGBTQ+ students and staff. There are several troubling and serious allegations that must be investigated, and I urge the school committees to focus attention on restoring a community-wide sense of trust and safety in our leadership. Thank you, Ann Dolan.
Thank you. We don't have any voicemails, correct? Sweet. So we'll move on to the superintendent's update.
Okay. Make sure people in the viewing public can hear me. Hopefully they can. I'm assuming that if our friends at Amherst Media aren't hearing me, they'll pop out and wave at me to speak more into the microphone. A couple of things I'll update the committee on. First and foremost is some clarity around the Title IX investigation. So first and foremost, I think that it's important to, and I want to be very careful to not taint the investigation or its process in any way. So I'm going to be broad in terms here, but mostly so that you know, I don't provide any information that then compromises that in any way. An initial complaint was registered in a Title IX investigation started in mid-April. Subsequent to that, there were other Title IX allegations raised and subsequent additions to that investigation made. As part and parcel of that are other things that are not strictly under the Title IX umbrella, which are also integrated with those Title IX complaints, and so are also part of the investigation. So the folks that we've engaged to do the investigation of the initial Title IX complaint and then subsequent ones and then other related matters that are integrated with that series of Title IX complaints are all being addressed and investigated currently, and that's part of why the length of time on the, or the estimated length of time for the reports to come out. And I say reports plural because there'll be a Title IX series of reports or a Title IX report and then others that will be part and parcel of the outcome of that investigation. So I just want to make that clear that there's some subtlety and I don't think anybody's been intentional in not providing that information or not catching that. I'm sure I've not been clear in any public statements I've made about that sort of order of events. So I don't, and I don't intend to imply anything other than just the sort of clarity of the complexity of what's being investigated currently. And so it is multiple Title IX questions that have been raised and are being investigated, as well as other things that fall outside of Title IX. But since they're so integrated with that, it's in some ways economy of research by the investigator to sort of carry on and investigate that work as well. But because of that breadth of question, it's taking the time that it's taking. So I did want to clarify that. Let me see if I had that. I think the other thing I'll say is that as a staff, as an administrative staff in particular, we're going to be getting together literally tomorrow for about to begin our conversation internally. I mean, we've had some informal ones. We're going to have formal ones starting tomorrow. With regard to what we need to do, action steps, and our actions that we're going to take relative to the events of this spring. I think there is an appetite for administrators to begin the process as soon as possible, both for themselves individually and their interaction with what has been in the public realm, as well as thinking about their staff and their students and how best to move forward from this point on. So I just wanted to relay that we are in our administrative team starting literally tomorrow. We would have started today, but the high school and middle school had already scheduled some work today amongst middle school and high school curriculum leaders and department heads to start aligning curriculum. So those administrators were tied up in that, so we scheduled starting tomorrow. So I did want to let people know that there are concrete steps beginning to happen and will continue to happen, I think, throughout the summer as we sort of fully unpack this, and some of it will be dependent upon what is fully discovered and verifiable or not within the investigations that are currently ongoing. So it's a very difficult place to sit with not having all the detail, and I think that's a place of discomfort for everybody in the process of an investigation. You often sit with a lot of unknowns, and so as a result, it's hard to sort of process that, and yet at the same time there are certain things that we know now and that we will be taking concrete, actionable steps as we begin the work of the summer and preparing for next school year. So I think I'll stop there, and then I'll pivot and talk about a decidedly more happy occurrence that I went to in the last week. So of course the high school graduated on the 9th. So as I've said to some people, some of the best things I've gotten to do in the last few weeks is to go to a lot of moving on and graduation ceremonies. So I went to the high school graduation. I kept my remarks brief because the high school kids really don't want to hear from me. So I kept my remarks fairly brief, but it was a lovely ceremony. Tremendous performances from our performing arts folks and kids. On Friday, the middle school did its moving on ceremony for its 8th grade students. A tremendous crowd in the middle school auditorium. I'm not sure I've ever been in there where it was more full. It was at capacity, if not a little over. It was a beautiful opportunity to demonstrate the kinds of things that are really happening in our school and the successes kids have and the true fondness they have for each other. And support they have for each other. So I think the kids are phenomenal, and I want to share that they are. And our staff are phenomenal in trying to support those kids and having them have a lot of success on a number of levels, not just academically. So I think we got to see a little bit of that at Friday's moving on ceremony for the 8th grade. And so that was a marvelous couple hours in my day. So those were the things I wanted to share with you this evening, and so I'll take any questions the committee might have for me.
Allison?
So I had heard this before, but hearing you confirm that again, I think is really helpful. But I think just to play back my understanding, what you were describing was initially there was one complaint filed that initiated a Title IX investigation. Subsequent to the meeting, there were multiple other complaints that were added to that. So it's investigations, plural, being conducted by one entity. Is that?
That's correct.
Correct.
So there was a single particular investigation started in mid-April. Subsequent to that, about 2 weeks, I don't want to get specific on the dates because I don't have them on in front of me, and I don't know some of those specific details about when allegations were forwarded to the investigator, but subsequent to that initial investigation were subsequent ones, and so it is investigations plural, and it also involves things other than just explicitly Title IX. So I do want to be clear that there are other areas that are being researched and investigated and will be part of the reporting that comes out of that.
Anyone else? Peter?
Yeah, just briefly, I mean, you had mentioned that, I think it was at our last meeting, that there were multiple Title IX investigations, but you put it in a clearer, more understandable way here in better context, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Jennifer?
Is there any update on timing, or are we still expecting the report in August?
So I haven't spoken to the investigator in more than a week as far as progress. I've seen him around, and he's doing his work. He's talking to people, requesting records, doing his research. So he hasn't provided me with any new detail about when he might be finishing. Obviously, he understands the urgency of completing it as quickly as he possibly can, but he wants to do it in a fair and even-handed and appropriate way. And so I think August is still a likely target date at this point.
Allison and then Irv.
You talked about getting started on some initiatives to support students in our schools. But I do recall, and I just want to clarify, that there were multiple things put in place in May and June as well. Recall that it was a partnership with the Stonewall Center, a DESE or state organization as well was partnering with Stonewall to come in and prepare some things for our students in our schools, and there were other supports and activities that were put into place. I don't know if is my recollection correct, or are those just sort of still in process? I mean, my question is like multiple things did get started in May and just may be carrying over, and you're talking about additional initiatives, or?
Right. So some aspects started. I would suggest that we are far from over with them, and that we are going to be continuing to work with those folks and others, and as we progress and think about our coming school year. So I think that there are some that are in process, some that are getting started. So it's a little bit of both.
Thank you.
You still?
Me? Yes.
Okay, Irv and then Anna.
I wonder if it's possible to get a scope of the investigation, as well as topics that will be addressed from the investigator, in as much that it would not compromise the investigation itself. So I would like to make that request, that we get the scope and the topics that are likely to be covered, because there's obviously great public interest in that, and also for me, I want to at least try to at least give some information to the public that says that what we are doing is all that we can do until such time as this is finished. Since we don't know the scope or the topics, it's impossible to do any other thing. But for me, it'd be really, really important if we could have that.
So, if I may, I'll answer that in a couple ways. I think, the conversation I have had with the investigator is one where he's extraordinarily cautious about going into that detail even with me, or anyone actually on the staff at this point. And I think that it also is a circumstance where there's some fluidity to the scope. In other words, I think there are conversations that are had, and they're overlapping and extending questions that get raised, and he's the nature and breadth and depth of the questions are still in process of being fleshed out, I guess, in some ways. It would be what I would suggest. And I think in regard to sort of the ability for the investigator to fully explore the questions and interview the various people involved, I think there'll be a strong hesitancy from the standpoint of putting much in the public realm, just because it might discourage folks from speaking as fully and freely as they'd like to. So I will ask the question. I'll pose a question of the investigator, sort of to what extent he could share or frame the conversation. My guess is he'll be likely to not provide much, and so he'll be a little cautious in that regard. So I just want to temper any expectations a little bit.
So you've talked a little bit about some of the initiatives that have been taking place within the school that really go towards supporting students. And I was wondering if you had any initiatives that were more directed towards staff.
So I think that, in talking about and just hinting at a little bit of what we're going to start working with tomorrow, I think that's exactly sort of the place we're starting there. In that we recognize the administrative staff, and they of course then think about their staff in their buildings and their reaction to this circumstance. And so That's part of what we're looking at in particular tomorrow, and obviously then from that we'll build into additional steps we might take relative to staff and preparing for the next school year, because there'll be some of the staff that were here last week and the last week of school, and then there'll be new staff as well. And so it's about sort of finding those two sets of people and merging them together and having a coherent whole to how we bring people forward, and necessarily meshed with that as well as then how does that play into our interactions with students and what we're doing and what we're striving to do relative to our students and our stated policies and goals and objectives that we have as a district have written and recorded over time.
Can I just follow up? Okay. So more specifically, one of the problems that had been voiced is that staff don't feel like there's an appropriate pathway to voice concerns. And I was wondering, with the suspension of Doreen Cunningham, is there a new pathway for staff to follow? And do you think that pathway is starting to work?
So I think that, broadly, I think if there are sort of questions, we've certainly encouraged people to even reach out to the investigator, because I think that's a piece of the puzzle to start with, is that if it's related to topics that have surfaced in the public realm, but obviously as they think about those things and then maybe things that they themselves have seen or experienced that they want to bring forward, we've been trying to encourage folks to be comfortable in reaching out and communicating that to the investigator. So that's the sort of first piece. I think that's part of our conversation tomorrow. Literally, it will be to sort of like, all right, now what, and how do we take that? And there are aspects of that and questions of trust and questions of protocols and that sort of thing. Some of which are particularly related to the topics in the Title IX investigation. Some are more broadly just questions of chain of command and reliance upon those things and whether we need to make changes to those. That'll be probably more concrete conversations we have as the summer progresses. I don't know that we'll get quite that far tomorrow. But nonetheless, I think there are significant steps in all those areas. And some of it's a matter of revisiting things that we've done in the past and we've done well in the past, and sort of re-establishing foundational sort of steps and processes and procedures and retuning ourselves to our norms and our expectations and revisiting just even the sort of things that we think we've had in place and are fine need to be revisited from a fundamental standpoint and start from scratch and sort of rebuild and repair those pieces of work.
Irv, go ahead.
Doug, I really appreciate what you've just said, because whenever you have a situation like this where the leader, suddenly disappears, all kinds of issues surface. Some of those issues are obviously deal with relationships that have now been interrupted, broken, challenged, whatever. So my question to you is, given that you're the interim, acting, that everything in my experience in organizational development and as a leader of organization tells me that this organization has to be hurting. Everything in me resonates with that.
And I would agree with that. And I think that part of the question that we have, or part of the conversations we've had to date in administrative meetings, were to kind of pose those questions a little bit to see where people were, what they were willing to share. I think we're going to be a little more focused and structured in that conversation tomorrow, and trying to discover or unpack that a bit amongst the administrative staff. And I think that's going to be helpful for us to get some sense of a broader question in the rest of the organization as far as the adults are concerned. So I think, while I would firmly agree with you that there are people hurting in varying degrees of that, and I think understanding that and understanding what all of that entails is part of our discovery and part of what we'll spend a little bit of time on tomorrow and probably a little bit ongoing, because it won't all sort of surface immediately. I mean, we'll touch on some topics tomorrow. We'll also get into some probably some actionable steps from that, but then I think we may have to, part of the conversation may also be, what do we do to sort of revisit and continue to communicate those concerns that surface later for people. I think sometimes you sort of have these conversations, and then 2 days later, because you've had that initial conversation, you think of something else that you think you want to share and that you need to share. And so I think we'll be I think ongoing with that question and revisiting that a little bit as part of our process as we move through the summer and prepare for the fall. And I think that's also going to be how the administrators are dealing with that will also be instructive as to how we might approach and some of the things we'll need to do with the staff. Because I think we'll get a sense of and some feedback from those administrators about the interactions they had with staff over the last couple weeks of school and what they heard, and then how they might approach those staff when we get back together come August, and how we do that.
Well, just to follow up, it would be important for me to know is that all the systems that were in place be examined in light of the incident, so that those systems can be looked at in detail, so that corrections can be made if needed.
Anybody else? All right, so we will move on to the chair's update, and I have none, so I'll take school committee announcements. Peter, have at it.
Yeah, given that this is our last meeting of the year, I just wanted to take a brief moment to respond to the repeated assertion about what I said or didn't say at the April 25th school committee meeting. So at that time, on April 25th, and there's a video of this meeting, so you can go back and watch it during the superintendent's update. All school committee had was one email from the public specifically concerned about conversion therapy, public comments that night about conversion therapy, and I had also heard informally that there was a post in a parent discussion group by a parent saying that an anonymous person contacted them to say that conversion therapy was happening at Arms. School committee had not heard of any Title IX report on conversion therapy or any topic, and this was weeks before the graphic article reports of harm and mistreatment of LGBTQ students. And what I said about the report of conversion therapy on April 25th at that meeting was that these are severe allegations, that from the school committee's perspective and capacity are unverifiable, that we've just had confirmed cases of false reports being shared as part of the Arms principal search, and that over the years, school committee has sometimes heard serious reports about both administrative and teaching staff that later turned out not to be true. Which is why I asked if there was any evidence or any formal complaints that have been filed about conversion therapy. I did not say that reports of conversion therapy were false or fabricated, and I certainly did not say that any other reports about harm to LGBTQ students which hadn't yet been brought to our attention on April 25th were false or fabricated. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other committee announcements? Allison?
So just reporting from the negotiating subcommittee, as publicly announced, we reached tentative agreement on our contract negotiations with the APEA. We're waiting on a finalized MOA document to be shared, and this committee will vote on ratification post the vote from the APEA.
Perfect, thank you. Any other committee announcements? All right. So moving right along, we will move on to the, I don't know if we can move on to the ARMS, LGBTQIA plus.
So here's where I have to apologize to everyone, because with the holiday on Monday and the posting of the meeting earlier than expected, I certainly mentioned, having Principal Sharon come tonight. I didn't get a chance to sort of close the loop with him and confirm. and certainly wanted to today as well, and did not get an opportunity to do that. So unfortunately, Principal Sharon's not here with us tonight to talk about the middle school. But if the committee schedules another meeting in June, which may or may not happen, depending on negotiation and contract ratification, we might be able to have him come back and talk to this a little bit. I'm sorry that I did not connect with him and confirm his availability for tonight, and so for that I apologize.
We do have our public statement, which
Let Irv kick it off.
we'll kick it to Irv then.
Get you off guard.
I think this public statement was posted.
It is.
It was, all right. So Jennifer and I worked on this in trying to navigate a number of different things. We wanted to bring this to the school committee for discussion and then a vote. So the Regional School Committee, RSC, is aware that our community is hurting right now and that there are many unanswered questions about the mistreatment of trans and non-binary students at the Amherst Regional Middle School, ARMS. Our hearts go out to the students and families who have been negatively affected by these incidents. We expect that the Title IX investigation being conducted by attorney Ed Mitnick will cover many allegations, most notably those about the mistreatment of trans and non-binary students at ARMS. While the Regional School Committee awaits the outcomes of the Title IX investigation, we want to affirm our commitment to our LGBTQ+A students and community. We take these issues very seriously, and in pursuit of what is honest, fair, and just, commit ourselves to taking concrete actions within our purview to ensure that relevant issues not addressed in the Title IX investigation are examined in detail by the Regional School Committee. In addition, after the Title IX investigation report is submitted, the Regional School Committee will determine the committee's response to the letter submitted to the committee by the Amherst Pelham Education Association, APEA, on May 13th, 2023.
Yeah,
All right, so we'll open it up for discussion. Is there anybody who wants to chime in?
Can I ask where we are in the agenda? I did not see the.
So we're at the, I'm stalling, it says. it's,
2A?
Yep, 2A, ARMS, LGBTQIA plus
Okay.
supports.
I have it here.
Oh, perfect.
I just didn't know where that.
Okay.
Does anyone want to chime in on the statement itself? Nothing?
Can I just ask, I'm new, so I'm a little unsure about how things work here. There's nothing that the committee can do at this point without disrupting the Title IX investigation. We can't do our own investigation into anything really related to some of these complaints because it would disrupt the Title IX investigation, and so we are really dependent upon the Title IX investigation being concluded before we can make any additional moves on our own. Is that true?
Shades of gray. To an extent, we're hindered by things that are like within the scope of those investigations.
Since we don't know the scope of the investigations.
Right there. There's the shades of gray right there.
Well,
Okay.
and the other thing I would just comment is that in general, personnel matters are, with the exception of the superintendent who's directly hired by the school committee, those personnel matters are ones that you can take up. Other personnel matters are handled by the administration of the district. And personnel matters are generally private, by and large. So there'll be, that's the other piece of the puzzle here as far as how much is even available to share with public at large, there will be things that you guys will see and think about and have to evaluate relative to the reporting that comes back that will remain for your eyes only, as they say. You know, there will be aspects, because it's personnel related, that are never public documents. And I don't do that to say we want to hide anything. It's just the nature of how personnel law works and what we can and can't do in that regard. And so I think it'll be hard for the community, because there'll be things that they'll want answers to that just won't be publicly available. Obviously, anything that we can share publicly, we will, because I think the community demands it, but also I think it's the right thing to do. And so as much as we can, we'll share, but we'll be cognizant of employment law.
And related specifically to the no confidence vote, is there anything more specific we can say about how we're responding to that?
I would kind of defer back to his comment on the personnel issues. Go ahead, Jennifer.
Okay, so let's see. As Irv mentioned, he and I worked on this statement together. I would have preferred it to be more specific and to list specific questions that the school committee intends to get answers to. However, we shared an initial draft with Mark Terry. You shared our initial draft with Mark Terry, thank you, Ben, who is the school committee's lawyer. And he advised us that any mention of specific individuals implicates their privacy rights, and that if we were to mention allegations or an investigation of individuals, that we should do that in executive session, and those individuals would need to be properly notified. But since we wanted to make this a public statement, he advised us to not infringe on individual privacy rights, and instead to focus on our key point, which is that we will take action. The school committee will do whatever is in our purview to address the situation and to hold accountable those who are responsible. So it's frustrating, and the statement is broad, intentionally so. As I said, I had wanted it to be more specific, but we were advised by our attorney to not be more specific or mention individuals at this time. We've heard from the acting superintendent that the scope of the Title IX investigation has broadened, and you even mentioned this at our last meeting, Doug. So my hope and my expectation is that the report will answer many of the questions that I have and that I know many members of the public have. So I guess while I have the floor, I also want to say that I'm not going to tell members of the public that you need to be patient, because you don't need to be patient, and being impatient is entirely understandable and warranted right now. But we are going to wait. We are going to wait for the results of the Title IX investigation before we decide on any action. At least I think we should wait, and that was my intent. That was our intention of this statement, is that I think we need to wait.
Right, and I would agree, and I would also say that pending the outcome of the investigation, there are some things that were in our original statement that are worth revisiting. That's as cleanly as I can say that. But also to speak to your other question, there actually are things that we can do that don't necessarily directly affect this. Like one issue that I see throughout this whole situation is we need separation of certain powers. I don't know if you can read into that what you want. And then also, we need a comprehensive whistleblower, like not just a policy, but we need a procedure by where if somebody's scared to say something about somebody, to file a complaint about somebody in our district because they have so much power, there needs to be a workaround for that. And I think that would have it wouldn't have solved the problem because the problem existed, but it would have made it a lot easier to deal with in a timely manner, and we wouldn't be so hindered like we are right now, I think. And I also want to acknowledge that Tillman had his hand raised before I started babbling, so go for it.
No, thanks. I just wanted to ask about the concrete actions within our purview in that statement, and specifically ask what are the actions that we as the school committee can take so that the expectations of what can be achieved once that report comes out are clear. And to my understanding is that we are in control of the policies, like you just mentioned, Ben, and we can certainly work on those. We're in charge of hiring the superintendent, but my understanding is that we're not even able to appoint assistant or associate superintendents without the recommendation from the superintendent, and that we're handling the budget. But beyond that, as the acting superintendent just mentioned, pretty much everything else is within the administration of the school district. Is that correct?
Go ahead, Jen.
So I think you're telling me you're mostly correct. The school is my understanding of the school committee's responsibilities and roles and power is that we are in charge of the superintendent. That we oversee the superintendent. Let's see. Ben and I had a conversation with with Mark Terry, our attorney, about the assistant superintendent, and the Mass General Law is somewhat vague about the assistant superintendent. I believe it says something to the effect of the school committee, with the recommendation of the superintendent, appoints the assistant superintendent. I think it's clear that we don't have any supervisory or evaluation purview over the assistant superintendent, but I think the school committee, in conjunction with this acting superintendent, has purview over the role of the assistant superintendent. I think that is going to remain to be seen, and I feel like I'm getting a little too close to mentioning individuals, but I think Mass General Law does state that the school committee appoints this assistant superintendent upon recommendation of the superintendent.
Peter, and then we'll come back to Tillman.
So just to close that loop, so Jennifer is correct. So 6 or 7 years ago, we voted and approved the appointment of the assistant superintendent. After that, that's where our direct role ceases. Now, that doesn't mean that we can't have agenda items and talk to the superintendent about any topic under his purview, including oversight of the assistant superintendent. So that's just that. So overall, I think this is a very good statement. I appreciate what Irvin and Jennifer have worked through to get it to this point, to make sure that it's legal and accurate. I also won't tell people to be patient, but I do think that the value of having a deliberative process is that you then make the foundation for potential action much stronger to base upon. I think in some respects, the more serious the allegation, the more deliberative a process you want, so that then if there's action that the superintendent or the school committee needs to take, then you are on the firmest ground. And so I like how it's stated. I think the phrase of not addressed in the Title IX, so that not addressed in the Title IX investigations is, it handles the valid concern that Irv brought up, is that we don't know the exact scope of the investigation. So that was my one actual, my first recommendation for change is that we change this to investigations throughout, to clarify that these are multiple investigations. I don't think we need to add the clarity that Doug just talked about, but just so that people know that there's multiple investigations. So I like the first two paragraphs. I would prefer that we remove the final sentence for a few reasons that I'll just summarize now, and I can come back to later, just in the interest of allowing other people to speak. But I don't think that it's necessary to state that we'll have some sort of formal response to a letter from our employee union. Given that we're already committing ourselves to taking concrete actions within our purview, that covers the topics in the letter. I'm also skeptical of the vote of no confidence claim, unless a much stronger base of evidence is presented. And again, I can go into more detail about my concerns there. And even then, I don't think it's advisable to set a precedent or get into the practice that the school committee responds directly to these kinds of letters of demand from our employee unions, beyond taking them as points of information to consider, like we do with all public input that helps inform our actions. Specific to the topics in the letter, allegations of what someone did or didn't do, or knew or didn't know, and the scope of the Title IX investigations for the superintendent or assistant superintendent, that will either be covered in the Title IX investigations, or we'll come back and we'll see that it's not, and then we'll pursue that. As far as the performance of the job duties of the assistant superintendent, like we just mentioned, that's not in our purview to evaluate. We can certainly talk to the superintendent about it, but it's not our direct responsibility. And as far as the concerns raised about hiring practices, we periodically discuss this at school committee. I think the last time it was on the agenda was this past January. I think it comes up every year, if not every other year. And so if any member wants that to be on a future agenda, talking about hiring practices with the superintendent, and that's certainly within our purview. And then, you know, and so I think just generally speaking, that is the approach that we should take. And I'll leave it at that for now.
Thank you. Allison and then Tillman.
Yeah, I appreciate this statement, and I have just a couple, sort of building a little bit on what Peter just described about making investigation plural. I would also endorse and ask that we remove the phrase Title IX, because we just heard from Doug that there's other aspects to the investigations being considered that aren't just related to a Title IX formal complaint. That, you know, the Title IX complaint may have be what initially instigated the investigation, but he just explained to us that it is beyond that. So I would like to see it say we expect that the investigations being conducted, et cetera, et cetera. And then I would also suggest in the last sentence of that same paragraph that we commit ourselves to taking concrete actions within our purview to ensure that relevant issues are examined in detail by the regional school committee. I don't think that we need to limit it to just those that are not addressed in the investigations, because presumably there's going to be findings in that report that we are going to want to act on. And I think if we're making the public statement now that we're committing ourselves to action, we shouldn't limit it to just those things that are not in that report. So just changing that to taking concrete actions within our purview to ensure relevant issues are examined in detail by the regional school committee. And I share, for different reasons, I sense that we should remove that last sentence about responding to a letter. First off, there's the vote of no confidence, which was a press release that I don't recall that was actually a letter to us, and then there's been subsequent letters. So I think if we want to include, if the rest of the committee wants to keep something in there, we should be actually very specific about what we're responding about, because it's not clear to me what's intended in that. But I also share we receive input, from whether it's from APEA or other staff, whether it's from community members, whether it's from family. We receive letters a lot that include the word demand or command or direct or other sort of forceful statements. And we don't, as a rule, or at least we haven't made a practice of having a formal response. That doesn't necessarily mean that we're not responding. I think, I think, by responding to the investigations and committing ourselves to taking action, that is in itself, this statement is in and of itself a statement in response to input that we've received from the community beyond, the APEA as well as the rest of the community. So if we want to keep some sort of commitment to a response, I'd encourage us to broaden it to beyond just what we've heard from the APEA, but to the entire community, because we're hearing a lot of passionate demands for action beyond just that. So I'm not sure why we should single them out as deserving more of a formal response than the rest of the community.
I had the one addition here. We left out the queer and questioning folk. I figured they count too. Some of us are either. Go ahead. Or wait, I was going to go to Tillman and then Irv. Sorry about that. Tillman?
I just wanted to say that I agree with Jennifer about the description of the scope of the committee's purview. And I wanted to move to amend the statement with the 3 changes that were mentioned, which is changing Title IX investigation to investigations, changing the text around issues, and removing the last sentence.
Point of order.
Right.
So Tillman's making a motion, but we actually haven't made a motion on the statement yet.
Yeah.
So we don't have a motion on the floor yet, but I think we'll take his input.
Yes.
Go ahead, Irv.
I can accept some small changes to that last sentence, but I think that last sentence is important. no matter how one leads an organization or what the response of an organization is, there are individuals within that organization who have a right and deserve to be heard. If we or any organization says, well, you know, they're a member of this class or this union or whatever, and so therefore we can't recognize them, that seems not to be something that I would consider to be acceptable. A community member is a community member is a community member. And the APEA they are community members. And community members, this particular community members have expressed concern and have a particular issue that they wanted to bring before us. As far as I'm concerned, it's incumbent upon us to at least recognize that.
Jennifer?
So I'm comfortable with a few of Allison's suggestions. First, changing investigation to investigations and eliminating or omitting the Title IX moniker, as well as removing the not addressed in the Title IX investigation from the last sentence. Thank you. I think those are good changes. I am in favor of keeping the last sentence about the APEA vote of no confidence. I have a very different view of the APEA and of unions than Mr. Demling does. I think that the APEA is made up of our teachers, our staff, and we talk a lot about how much we appreciate what our teachers do and how much we value their contributions. The APEA is not different from our teachers. They are one and the same. And I know, because I am a union member, that unions are democratically run and that union leadership is democratically elected, that bargaining teams are democratically elected, and that votes of no confidence are democratically taken. So I have no discomfort at all with the 80% vote of no confidence that was, which I believe it was 80%, that was shared with us. I also wanted to point out that we did receive the letter of no confidence from Claire Coco, the APEA Chair of Communications, on May 13th, and I forwarded the email to the rest of you so that you have it, so you know that they did send that to us directly. I wanted to make a motion, but I'm not going to speak and then make a motion, so I'll end at that for now.
Go Peter and then Allison.
So to expand on some of the detail, now that we're into that subtopic, so the reason why I have serious concern that the claim of a vote of no confidence is credible and was democratically taken is the reports that we've heard in public comment tonight from 7 ARP staff, 7 members of the APEA, as well as reports that I've heard directly from a number of staff. And so these concerns include that this was not a vote. This was not a selection of yes or no options. This was a statement of no confidence that staff then signed their names to. It's been reported to me and that not all staff were aware that this was happening, and this is was also repeated in the public comment that we received. The people didn't know, that their colleagues didn't know. Perhaps most concerningly, the superintendent's name was not part of the original statement. It was added at some time after the start of the process. And we've heard reports of staff not knowing that it was intended as a vote of no confidence in the superintendent. Indeed, to quote an excerpt from the public comment from the APEA teachers, from the APEA members who reported these concerns, many of us did not vote no confidence with Mike in mind. Some of us were not aware of the vote since it happened so quickly and we were not able to participate. Others of us who fully support Mike Morris based on his track record were voting no confidence in other administrative staff. I've also heard reports that the way that this vote occurred was that it was presented in the presence of union representatives openly. Members were asked to sign openly, and some members reported feeling pressure to do so. Now, you take all those concerns together, and I have no way to validate these reports, and I certainly wouldn't suggest that the school committee go on some investigative exercise to try and validate these reports. So I can't draw definitive conclusions. I can't validate what these staff have told me. I can't validate what staff have written in here and signed their names to tonight. But with multiple concerns being reported by multiple staff, I think it's reasonable to be skeptical, unless a much stronger base of evidence is presented that documents the process and the evidence behind the claim. We also know from statements from the heads of the Massachusetts Association of School Committees and the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents this year that votes of no confidence have been used by teachers' unions for a variety of different purposes, especially in the last 2 years. They estimate in their statement that about 24 districts have used this for contract negotiations, for various issues related to COVID and vaccines and whatnot. And so and as we know, in our district, we have had a highly contentious and protracted contract negotiation, which itself happened after a highly contentious and protracted conflict over the return to in-person school. So that's, again, that's not evidentiary, but I think it's enough for us to be skeptical of something as significant as a claim that 80% of staff voted no confidence in the superintendent, and that it doesn't change our actions one way or another. We already are committing in the second paragraph that we will take actions within our purview, and if it's not covered in the investigations, that we will take action, then we will examine in detail. So we had that commitment, and to respond to this letter, I don't think is in the best interest of the school committee going forward, because this will continue to happen. We'll continue to get demands and letters and of demanding formal response, and I don't think it's productive for what we can do to support students in the district.
Allison?
I just want to add that I share I have this similar skepticism. I've heard independent from multiple sources, similar comments of just not being aware, not being, signing something that had one person's name but not another person's name included in the no confidence vote. And I've heard it from, like I said, multiple independent people, not from school committee members, but from other folks. It's enough to give me pause, particularly when I think of it within the context of the timing of it coming in the midst of our contract negotiations and seeing this happening across the state and frankly across the country. So I have a similar skepticism just based on people that I trust who have come forward and told me that this is not what they had signed.
So, if I could weigh in for 2 seconds here. Like, I've actually been looking at this last sentence the whole time. I think I've looked at this way different than everyone else, because my initial thought was that we actually should have mentioned the vote of no confidence specifically. But like, the more I look at this, we're saying that after the investigations are concluded and submitted, that we'll determine what our response is. Our response could be nothing at that point, theoretically. So I don't necessarily see the harm in it. And like I say, no offense, I kind of wanted it to be a little bit more weighted at the end. But that's just my 2 cents. I know I'm the oddball here. Go ahead.
This particular last sentence, to me, is almost agnostic. And so I don't see why we're, let me back up. I can understand where those who disagree with this, and how they're reading into it. However, what I assume you're reading into it, given what you've said, is not what is printed here. It's just not printed here. If you could point it out to me where it is printed that we're talking about specifics, then I'll be more than happy to disqualify this. But there's nothing in here that says that. In fact, what Ben just said is correct. The RSC will determine the committee's response to the letter submitted to the committee. I mean, I don't understand why there is an issue with this. And the only issues that I can see that you would have with it is that you are reading into it all kinds of assumptions that are not borne out by the statement itself.
I'm going to take Jennifer and then Tillman. Oh, sorry.
So, Mr. Demling has shared a lot of rumors and hearsay about the APEA and about the votes. And I think that we need to take all of those with a grain of salt. Mr. Demling also shared with the school committee a statement from the as he mentioned, the MASS, the Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents, and the MASC, the Massachusetts Association of School Committees, that I found, as a union member and as a worker, I found the statement to be very anti-worker and anti-union, which I'm afraid the MASC has a reputation of being. They accused unions of using a vote of no confidence to forward their cause, as if that's not a valid thing to do. It's a completely valid thing to do for a union to exert its power in that way. As for the alleged or supposed voting irregularities around this vote, well, that's why it's not 100%. And you might say, even with all those voting irregularities, it was 80%. I mean, I'm sure many of us know that, like, not everyone reads all of their emails all the time, so people may not have been aware that something was happening. That doesn't make the overall vote any less valid. Having said all that, if individuals on the school committee don't want to believe the vote, that's fine. You don't have to believe it, and we can't make you believe it. But going along with what Ben and Irv have said, we're not saying how we're going to respond or any specifics about responding to the vote of no confidence. We're merely saying after the investigations are completed, we will then decide what our response will be. And I think we need to include that sentence because we were asked, and for that very basic reason.
Tillman, then Allison.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to something that Irv said earlier, which I think was something along the lines that all members of our community are equally important. And so I would be comfortable with that statement at the end if we said that we're going to respond to the community, because many people have raised similar concerns. And, I think we should respond to all of them rather than to one specific request.
Thank you. We'll go Sarah Best, then Allison.
So I actually had the same thought that Tillman did. I think the community at large has asked for a response. So I think rather than specifically calling out the APEA, or at least adding to it to say, we'll respond to the community, because, we've had lots of people come to visit us in the last couple of weeks regarding this. So I think it should probably be a little more broad.
Allison?
And I support that, and I'll just go back. That was my original suggestion, was to broaden that to be the community. And if folks want to call out the APEA, we could say a response to the APEA and the broader community, so that we're still naming that and naming that we are going to respond to them and the full community that has been making passionate demands of us. And I feel strongly that we should be clear that we want to respond formally to all of them. And I just want to say, I know I hear you both in terms of saying it will determine and sort of emphasizing that means that we could decide no. But in other committees, we've made similar statements that have non-committal comments that then a month or two later, we're interpreting them as we committed to doing that, even when it has strongly urge as an example of wording. So I'm very conscious of the implication of saying something, even if we couch it in some sort of loose terms like "will determine," that sound like we're not making a commitment, but the community and even some of ourselves will interpret that as a commitment to a response. But I'm fine with all of that if we just add "and the community" to that last sentence.
What I hear you saying is that the entire thing is all right with you as long as we add "and the community." So you're not only just APEA plus the community. I can go along with that.
Could we add
Well-
as a whole to that? Because it almost differentiates the APA from the community, like.
No, that's all right. I mean,
Right.
if people are comfortable with it, I can go out along with it.
Fair.
One more thing, and this is to Peter, in terms of the Massachusetts Associations for Superintendent and the other group that, the letter that you submitted. You know, when I read that, the first thing that came to my mind was, my God, this is a pure piece of propaganda, no matter how I read it. And if it were going to be, if it was, and I once I made that statement to myself, I went back and read it, and then I said, all right, they said 24 schools in the last 2 years. That's 24 schools. 24 districts, 24 districts. Well, there are over 300 districts. If you do the math of that, that's about 8%. So when I did the fact check of that, I was thinking, all right, if they're really, really concerned, you really want to convince me as a school committee member that what you sent out, at least make it so that there is some concrete evidence to support your claims. They did not present that at all. It was really not a good thing that they put out. Their claims they were making claims without evidence. They were not disaggregating them in relationship to, hey, these are only claims that were by school districts who had some actions by school teachers or whatever. So when I looked at it and as a whole, I couldn't take it seriously. I would have liked for them to have been more definitive, more, hey, these are the facts, folks. And then let me come to a conclusion after those facts. But that wasn't the way this letter was presented.
Peter, then Allison? Jennifer, oh my God, it's not even that late yet.
So I appreciate the discussion. We can agree to disagree on some of these things. That's why we're talking about them. So just to clarify, I don't believe nor not believe the vote of no confidence. What I said was that I'm skeptical and I have serious doubt about how the process was handled and whether it clearly reflects the will of staff based on the input that I've heard from staff directly and based on the input of staff, a lot of whom I really respect and know, from the public comment tonight. Again, that's not enough to draw definitive conclusions, and I'm not saying I draw a definitive conclusion. I'm saying that when I'm trying to assess the claim of a vote of no confidence as a point of information, that factors into my context. And that's the reason why I shared that letter. I totally get different opinions about the letter. You know, if you want the list of specific districts that have used those votes, I can. There's a couple of articles that have covered it. We can work on getting those.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's sort of here nor there. It was just a point of context that, you know, to take or not as we will in our decision making. The last just process point that I hope for tonight is that I hope we don't vote to end debate at any point. I know that with a 2/3 vote we can stop debate, but I just want to make sure that if any one person on our committee has additional comments or questions, that we are fully adjudicating that tonight. I think a full discussion is really necessary. I also think to try and avoid confusion, because we've talked about a lot of potential changes, if we could maybe convert that static PDF into a live document that's then edited so that we can see what it is we're voting on. Because at this point, I'm not sure that I could say what all the changes are and then keep that in my head as distinct from what's being presented.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Okay. I'm going to make a motion, and then I'm going to send the Google Doc with the amendments to Doug to display on the screen.
If you get a Google
Because
Doc,
I've got the
even
Google
better.
Doc going with the amendments. Okay.
Okay.
So
No, that's
I
great.
move that the regional school committee approve the statement, the June 20th statement in the agenda with the following amendments, with the following edits, which I'm going to post. I'm going to send Doug that in a second. With the following edits: omit Title IX everywhere that it's listed. Change investigation to investigations. Add Q so that it's LGBTQIA+. And also omit the not addressed in the Title IX investigations in the last sentence of the second paragraph, and add, and the community as a whole to the very last sentence before the period. Okay, Doug, I'm going to send this to you.
Words matter.
Shoot.
Mr. Chair,
Slaughter D.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
was that a motion?
Yes.
Second?
Point of order.
Question.
Doug, I suggest that you pull down your stop screen sharing until you.
Does not have to do with something illegal that is a civil right.
Okay, I emailed it to you. I don't know if you can see it. You got it?
Thank you.
What?
That means something entirely different. Just be aware. It means something entirely different to say investigation. Is it a little?
Go ahead, Irv.
You know,
We're in the middle of a motion. I don't know how to.
we are in the middle of a motion, but, but it's a motion that's in progress because the final edits haven't been put up for us. And that we haven't closed off discussion. Since that is so, I would, like to revisit that last paragraph where we do say, it's just not only just investigations. I think that that we can put down Title IX investigation and report in other investigations. And the reason I guess the reason I'm saying that is that we're not sitting here because of not Title IX. We've been talking about Title IX. To eliminate that doesn't make sense to me.
Ben, point of the order, I think.
Yep, go ahead.
So there was a motion by Jennifer. I seconded. Jennifer then gets to speak to the motion. And if we could increase the percent font on that, that would be helpful. It's the Zoom on the far left.
Then we would be dealing with Jennifer's edits.
But that's the motion.
Okay, so
Yes, I know.
I'm speaking to the motion. Okay, let's see. Well, I think that the taking concrete actions is our response to the community, but I'm in favor of adding to the community as a whole. Anyway, I think this is an important thing for us to do because we want to publicly say to the community that we're taking this seriously, that we will take action. As I said, I do think it's important to include the mention of deciding what our response will be to the APEA letter that they sent to us. That's all.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry about that.
I think, I don't know what the best way to keep Title IX in this statement is, but it could be either we expect that the Title IX investigations and other investigations being conducted, or it could be the investigations, including Title IX, being conducted. I don't know if either one of those are adequate or not awkward,
Yeah,
or how
got a
people
point of
feel about
order
it,
here.
something, yeah.
We have to deal with this motion that's on the floor. That's obviously a motion in motion, but anyway, right now, here's what we have.
Sarah Beth, go ahead.
Are we in the discussion portion?
Yep.
I guess I have first a question and then maybe a suggestion. So, Attorney Ed Mitnick is conducting Title IX investigation and others, or just the Title IX investigation, which has then expanded into more things?
He's doing all of it.
He's doing all of it.
Yeah.
Okay. So if he's doing all of the investigations, right? We expect the investigations being conducted, da da da. So then we are awaiting the outcome of Title IX and other investigations. So
Correct.
maybe we can add, like, unstrike the middle Title IX and then add and other investigations.
conceptually it makes sense.
Yeah, and then I think leaving at the bottom the Title IX crossed out is fine.
I lost track of hands. We'll go Peter, Jennifer.
I move to amend the motion as Sarah Best just described.
Jennifer?
I will accept that as a friendly amendment, just so I understand. Sarah Bess, you're suggesting that the sentence that begins, while the RSC awaits the outcome of the, keep Title IX and add, let me make sure I have
No,
suggested changes. Hold on. Sorry. Of the, hang on one second. Title IX and other here. Whoops. Can't type while people are watching. Here? Is that what you meant?
Yes, because Attorney Mitnick is conducting all of the investigations, right?
Great.
So there are the Title IX and others. So I think that's the clearest way to
Okay.
read it.
Great. I will accept that as a friendly amendment.
Is there any further? Hey, Tom.
So, because I am not, have not been informed about some of the background and some of the documents mentioned in this, this statement, I'm going to abstain when the vote comes.
That's fine. So is there any further discussion? Jennifer?
I know I'm just noting that the last sentence is a little awkward in that it says, in addition, after the investigations report is submitted?
Reports on.
After the reports are submitted? Does that doesn't substantiate?
Investigation
Reports. After the reports?
Investigation reports, single investigation, multiple reports.
It's only one report.
I think there are going to be multiple.
No, there's going to be multiple reports.
Can
Okay.
we just say after the reports are submitted without substantially changing the meaning? Is every?
Yep.
Reports are submitted. I'm getting there. Oops. Can't type when people are watching. Okay. In addition, after the reports are submitted. I'm taking my own friendly amendment.
As long as you don't disagree.
We've got a question.
Peter.
Can we maybe just read the last two paragraphs out loud so we can reset the tape?
You can read them.
Okay, sure. We expect, hold on, in different classes. We expect that the investigations being conducted by Attorney Ed Mitnick will cover many allegations, most notably those about the mistreatment of trans and non-binary students at ARMS. While the RSC awaits the outcome of the Title IX and other investigations, we want to affirm our commitment to our LGBTQIA+ students and community. We take these issues very seriously, and in pursuit of what is honest, fair, and just, commit ourselves to taking concrete actions within our purview to ensure that relevant issues are examined in detail by the RSC. In addition, after the reports are submitted, the RSC will determine the committee's response to the letter submitted to the committee by the Amherst Pelham Education Association, APEA, on 5/13/23, and the community as a whole.
Is there any further discussion? So oh wait. Did I leave Tillman on? You good, Tillman? He's good.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll go roll call vote then. We'll start. Allison?
Allison, aye.
Tom?
Tom Fanning, abstain.
Peter?
Peter, aye.
Irv?
Aye.
Sarah Bess, aye.
Tillman?
Till an aye.
Ben, aye. Jennifer?
Aye.
And an aye.
So it passes. I said Ben, aye. I'm Ben. So it passes 8-1. Is that accurate?
No, 8-0.
8-0-1. There we go.
One abstain.
All right.
I have a question, Mr. Chair.
Have at it.
The Amherst Pelham summer activities, if any, that are going on, over the next couple of months. Are there actions being taken to make sure that what has happened in the past and what this evening's conversation was about, to make sure that those kinds of actions by staff are not going to happen this summer?
I'm going to deflect that to the superintendent because I wouldn't deal with the operational side, but.
So I think the short answer is yes. I mean, I think given the awareness of you know, the issues that have been raised and the concern around that, and you know, there's probably a heightened awareness to make sure to pay attention to those details a little bit more than ever, to be perfectly honest. And so I think that you know, in alignment with our stated policies and goals, you know, we're still trying to be true to those, and so the opportunity for our staff to live up to those is present in those summer programs, and so we expect them to be able to, and I think that's, you know, if there are changes or modifications to sort of protocol that we might be taking, you know, we'll communicate those to staff immediately, and you know, because it would apply even in the summer programs. But you know, in lieu of those actionable steps at this point, you know, obviously the concerns that might be raised or recommendations that might be made to us relative to situations that arise, and it wouldn't have to necessarily be specific to, I mean, it'd be any sort of issue relative to kids in our buildings. I mean, not just necessarily ones of sexual orientation or any of those things. I think any question would be ones that we want to hear about and want to keep those lines of communication open and take action as quickly as we can, and not, you know, sort of revisit any issues where kids might be harmed. So I think, I mean, that was the long answer. The short answer is, like, yeah, we're going to do everything possible to do right by our kids, whether in summer programs or anytime they're in our buildings.
Thank you.
One more question.
Fire away.
Short answer, please. Will this statement from the Regional School Committee that was just approved be shared with staff who are working this summer?
If you would like it to be.
Yep.
We'll do
that.
That it's shared out. Sure.
Yep.
It's a public statement anyway.
Right.
Fair. Jennifer?
Can we take a 5-minute break?
I think we should. So we will
Thank you.
take a 5-minute break starting at, have at it.
I move that we extend our meeting by 30 minutes beyond our 2.5 hours.
I keep forgetting that part. Second. Take a roll call vote. Allison?
Aye.
Tom?
Tom, aye.
Peter?
Peter, aye.
Irv, aye.
Sarah Beth?
Aye.
Ben, begrudgingly aye.
We have the policy that we go
Tillman?
2.5 hours. You have to vote every additional half hour.
Yeah.
Jennifer?
To make us
Aye.
try and be
And Dana?
Anna, aye.
efficient with our time.
Yes.
And we will reconvene at 9:16.
What time?
We'll move on to policy discussion and possible vote on the instructional materials policy, IJA. I don't know which member of the, Peter? Have it?
Yep, so this was just to reset the table for our new members, maybe. I'll give a slightly longer description of this. So this is the policy that determines how people, if they want to, can object to materials in our school and what the process for dealing with those objections are. And basically, our librarians took it upon themselves in light of news around the state and the country. In recent years, there's been a drastic uptick. They came and presented to us a couple meetings ago and gave a much better overview of this than I'll be able to now. But essentially, there's been a significant increased frequency, not just around the country, but in Massachusetts as well. So even though Massachusetts, we think of ourselves as, you know, the liberal bastion, it's been quite the issue as well. So this has been a topic of importance in discussion with librarians in public schools across the state and the country. And so they looked at our current policy, which was very old, and formed a group, and over the course of the year came up with a draft reconsideration of the policy and then a form to go with it that identifies what the process is. So they brought it to policy subcommittee. We reviewed it with them. They brought it to here to a largely positive response. We had some changes. They went back and made those changes. So I've been primarily talking with Ella Stalker, who's the ARAHS librarian, whose workspace we're currently in. But she's been working with all the librarians throughout the district. And Susan Wells, the Wildwood librarian, is the one who made the changes, did all the work for the changes on this go around here. I won't go into like the full, read the documents there, they're in the meeting, but essentially it defines a process and procedure that's very prescriptive for how to submit a concern, and then the group that forms to review that concern, and then ultimately makes a recommendation to the superintendent, and then if there's still appeal after that, it can be taken to the school committee. But the sort of the benefit of this kind of structure is, at least for those who districts in the country that have adopted this so far, is that it gives you a defined way to direct individuals who might have concerns. And you know, I was talking at the top mostly about what we might think of as, you know, negative activity of people maybe not with the best of intentions objecting to material, but you know, this is also a way for the public to be aware of what we're teaching, and if they feel like there's something that we should be teaching that we aren't, this is a way to do that as well, in review of those materials. So I'm not sure if there's anything else anybody else from the policy subcommittee would want to add to that. Jennifer and Sarah Bess are also members, so please feel free to add. That was a short update.
I didn't see whose hand went up first that time.
Sorry, Peter, did you say in your introduction that someone could appeal to the school committee? Because I don't think that is part of the policy.
I might have that wrong.
There's a review committee that whose membership is listed, and a school committee member could be should be a member.
Yeah. So third paragraph from the bottom on the once the use of particular instructional materials has been reviewed and reconsidered through the review committee procedure, and a final conclusion has been reached, it shall not be subject to further review based on the same concerns unless additional factual evidence validates the concern. Appeals to review the process used in the reconsideration shall be made to the school committee. So it's the superintendent's decision, and then you can ultimately, if you want, appeal it to the school committee. If I'm reading that correctly.
I have a question. It says appeals to review the process, not the decision. I guess I don't think it's appropriate or warranted for the school committee to be making decisions on material. I think that those decisions should be made by educators. And I thought that we had removed the school committee from the decision-making process, other than having a school committee member on the review committee. So now I'm not sure.
I think it says.
Go ahead.
So I think the paragraph above that answers it. The superintendent will present the review committees to the recommendation, and the superintendent's decision is final. And then but that's separate. The things.
Peter?
I
Go ahead.
think I'm remembering this part of our discussion on the subcommittee now. So it's exactly what you said a moment ago, Jennifer. It's appeals to review the process used in the reconsideration, right? And so, yeah, like when you read it quickly, that could be misinterpreted as I just did 30 seconds ago. So maybe there's a wording there that can clarify that it's that the school committee isn't the Supreme Court of the instructional review. It's hey, because we do own the policy, right, that guides the process. And so we would be the appropriate body if they said, hey, we didn't feel like we got a fair review. We're not appealing the actual decision, but we want to give you feedback on the process. So I don't know if there's like a wording that is occurring to someone at the moment that might help clarify that.
Allison, go ahead.
It does say appeals to review the process, so I wonder if you just put a paragraph break right before the word appeals, because it's an appeal about the process, not an appeal of the decision. That might, I think because it's in that paragraph, it suggests that the appeal is of the final decision, not of the process.
Oh, I had something else.
Go ahead.
So I also, well, first want to say thanks again to the librarians who worked on this, because I know they spent a boatload of time. And then also, I think one of the important things that they made sure was in here is that the person appealing the material has to be somehow related to the community. So they have to be a parent or someone like somehow related to the school. It can't be, Joe Schmo from somewhere else that comes in to appeal it. So I think that was an important piece.
I don't see that in this statement, and I would support that.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
It's in the on occasion paragraph. On occasion, however, individuals or groups that are members of our student body or community. The original policy, I believe, just says individuals may wish to have the use of particular instructional reviewers considered. So they added that are members of our student body or community.
There's also a sentence a little further on that says we will not accept requests.
Okay, great.
Oh, yeah.
So the I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So just procedurally, so the action would be to move to approve this policy.
Anybody want to make a motion?
I move to approve the policy.
Second.
Moved by Anna, seconded by Allison, and we don't have to take a roll call vote now that we don't have Tillman? Is that how that works?
Right.
All right. Have at it?
Yeah, I'm just assuming that the move to approve the policy means as presented with the small edit that we just talked about. That's implied in the.
That's the
just for the record, I'm just clarifying.
With the amendment, yes.
Yeah, that little.
Yes.
Okay, yeah,
yes.
perfect.
All right, so is there any further discussion? Yes, there is. Jennifer.
And the amendment being just making that appeals to review the process sentence its own paragraph? Oh, okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? All right, so all those in favor? All those opposed? So it passes almost unanimously? Oh, abstentions? One abstention. So this one passes 8-0 to 1.
7-0.
7-0. Freaking math, man. All right. Perfect. So we'll move on to policy discussion, public comment, BEDH. Who wants to, Tom, real quick.
What is BEDH?
The public comment. Public comment policy. Go ahead, Peter.
Yeah. So BEDH is it's technically public participation at school committee meetings. It's the policy that covers our public comment.
Okay.
Item 2C in the agenda.
But what do the letters BEDH stand for?
Got me on that, Peter.
So there's these are great questions. Like if you're like super fresh to the committee. So school committee policies generally are encoded with up to 4-letter identification, just to give them a unique identifier. It's from what I've seen, it's fairly standard. The sections across the state, and so there's a policies link at the top of board docs. If you go there, you'll see our policies, and they're into different lettered sections. And then, so he's showing it. Governance and operations, school administration, et cetera. Mass Association of School Committees has a template policies that a lot of schools base their policies on. And so even though we could call our policies anything we want, you'll find almost every district's public comment policy is BEDH. And so they're just organized together in terms of policies that are similar to each other.
So that is the label put on public comment policies.
It's like section headers.
Yeah, it's like
BEDH.
Yeah. So if you at your leisure, if you go through the policies, there's policy DFA, Amherst Pelham Regional School District Investment Policy, policy for almost anything you can imagine.
Yeah.
We used to get a massive binder printed out of all the policies, but we don't do that anymore, given a number of reasons. It's actually, and there's a search bar there as well that is actually pretty helpful for the policies. Okay, so BEDH, so this is a policy that the regional, at our last meeting, this body asked the policy subcommittee to take back and review and come up with options for changes based on our discussion. And one of the discussions we had, one of the topics of the discussion were about written public comment, and then also noting that we had changed relatively recently from remote to in-person meetings, and so does that change our thinking? And so a couple days later, we had our first review on June 1st, and so the document that you have attached to board docs is what our changes were as of that time. And I'll just note that as I present the different changes, these are just options to consider. Some of these we all agreed on. Some of them we had different opinions about whether they should be included. So as I go through, just to note that. And tonight's just a discussion. It's not a vote. And in addition, right before this meeting at 5:45, we had another meeting to review additional changes, and so we discussed more options there. Jennifer provided most of those, so after I go through these options, I'll ask Jennifer to speak to those additions as well. So the action tonight is just to review and discuss this. Think about the options. We'll have the summer, and then as soon as we reconvene for the upcoming school year, we will have hopefully a first read and then a second read, and then be able to vote. So briefly on the changes that are in this particular version, the 6.1 version. Just bring it up here. So the first one, under the second bullet, concerns written remarks. So this would be a change to have written remarks not displayed or read aloud at meetings. And actually, this is the major change that we were all supportive of. We had different wording to accomplish the goal, but I felt that this was a change that we could all support. With the specification that written remarks are added to the public meeting posting, that's part of the record. I think in the changes that we were just looking at a few hours ago in our second meeting, that last sentence is a little stronger. I think it says the district shall post the written remarks before the meeting begins, something to that effect. The next section there of changes is about handling of the different methods of coming to public comment. And if you scroll down to the very end, the other major change in this 6.1 version, there. So this is an addition that clarifies what the chair's role is in managing the procedure of public comment. This was one that we had different opinions on, so we submit it for the committee's consideration. This essentially clarifies in this one place that as we're sitting here in a meeting with Robert's rules, we can make points of inquiry. We can make points of order that the chair hears and makes decisions on, and like with any policy, like we did tonight, it can be suspended by vote of the committee as detailed in that particular policy where it talks about the 2/3 vote and whatnot. So that's this version. And then I'll turn it over to Jennifer to talk about options that we had in the other version. And then what we'll do is we'll merge these in a readable, clear one place and send this out to the committee so that at our leisure we can review it this summer and think about things.
So just to repeat what Peter said about our process here, typically when we look at changing policies, we have a first read and a second read. Tonight doesn't count as either of those. This is just our first initial discussion because we know that this is an important topic that the public may want to weigh in on. We wanted to bring it forward, but also not have this count as a first or second read. This is just the initial looking at the proposed changes. I'm going to make a few comments on what's up here, and then I'm going to share some other ideas that I had. First, backing up a little bit. My understanding of public comment, first of all, is that different public bodies set their own rules for public comments, and different public bodies handle it in different ways. The Amherst Town Council, for example, accepts emailed public comments, but they post them on their website. They don't display them during the meeting, as has been the custom for the Amherst for the Regional School Committee. My understanding of the practice of scrolling written public comments during the meeting, I was not on the school committee at the time, but my understanding was that this started when all the meetings were virtual meetings, and everyone was on Google Meet, or everyone was watching at home. And when the emails were scrolled, if you were watching at home, that's what was shown on your whole screen. And so, just setting aside the accessibility issue, which is an important issue, setting that aside, if you were watching at home, you could just read along. I mean, it was still hard to read with the scrolling, but that took up your whole screen. Now that we're in person, the practice of displaying public comments on a screen and scrolling, I think, makes less sense. People in the room, it's hard for them to see the text. People even in the first row, or let alone the back row. People at home, I don't think can see them at all. I participated in the Amherst School Committee meeting last week virtually, and I joined the meeting on my phone, and then I watched the Amherst Media live stream. The Amherst Media live stream is literally these cameras pointed at this table, and it catches like the bottom half of the screen. You can't read anything. So I think there was a time when Amherst Media was able to have their live stream be whatever was displayed, but I don't think that's happening on a regular basis today. So for that reason, and also because the scrolling of static comments is not accessible to people who are visually impaired and use screen readers to read documents, to people who don't read English very quickly or very well, and just like following a screen as it's jumping and someone else is scrolling, it's really hard to read. So I'm actually not, I think we should cease the practice of displaying written comment on a screen during the meeting. But I think we should make it a point to make sure that written public comments are posted publicly on our agenda site before the meeting starts in a scannable PDF or a screen readable and accessible PDF. And I think that solves the accessibility issues, and it does away with the practice of scrolling comments, which I think is not a best practice now that we're back in person. So having said all that, I actually think we don't need I don't think we need that written remarks will not be displayed bullet point at all. I think we just, my opinion is that we just strike it. We don't say anything about displaying or not. If we simply strike it, it doesn't. These are just suggestions. Then the policy is silent on whether we do it or not. Because I don't think we need to say that we. I don't think we need to say we're not going to do it in order to not do it. Let's see. The other comment I had, which I didn't realize until today, was that at some point it says the district will make best efforts. Yeah, in that same bullet point, the district will make reasonable efforts to post written remarks, but I think that should say the school committee, because it's the committee's responsibility, not the district. So I think the important thing is that we are sure to post the written public comments before the meeting begins. And then the final new bullet point about the chair manages the rules and procedures, I don't think that bullet point is warranted or is necessary, but I can understand why you all think it's necessary. But it's not necessary because this is a policy, and that bullet point doesn't set or create policy. It merely states things that are already policies. So that's my input on these suggestions. I had a few other suggestions about specifically calling out that public comment instructions will be posted in every meeting's agenda, which is our practice right now, but I think it would be good to make it a policy. And also to say that because some individuals want to contact the school committee, but they don't want their comments to be proactively publicly shared, that's why we have instructions for public comment. And if the instructions are not followed specifically, the school committee may decide to deem a comment not public comment, because we want to err on the side of not sharing someone's comment unless it is very clear that they want it to be public comment. I think those were my major suggestions. Also, in today's meeting, before this meeting, Doug, can you scroll up to the very top? The second paragraph talks about communicating with the school committee, but not public comments. So it says, if a resident in the middle there, if a resident or other individual would like to comment to the school committee, they may do so by mail or email. Comments may be sent to the chair, to an individual member, or to the entire committee. That sentence is not about public comment, it's just about contacting the school committee. And we discussed today that it's kind of confusing to have it in this public participation policy. So we discussed striking that sentence. I think those are the major points.
Thank you. Does anybody want to? There we go. Allison?
Just, I can't see which sentence you were saying is being stricken.
Sorry. It's at the very top, in the second paragraph. It's the third sentence, if a resident or other individual. That's just saying you can email us anytime, and you can email one of us, but that doesn't really make sense in the public comment.
Thank you.
Policy.
I thought we reworded that to make it more clear, right? And like made it a different paragraph. I didn't write it down though.
I think we just struck that sentence, but we did it today just before this meeting, and it didn't make it into the meeting packet.
Allison?
And this is great. Thank you, Policy Subcommittee, for taking this up and thinking about this. And I appreciate having the summer to sort of chew on it and marinate a little bit before we come back. I think one thing, and I, you don't want to dictate practice in a policy, and I appreciate that sort of I think you said that you've added in sort of, or you're proposing adding in sort of how we describe it in our agendas. And I'll just note that after this last meeting, we did work, the chairs of various committees worked together to come up with a solution. I think because Jennifer, you pointed out the wording was saying text to this, but you couldn't text to that. So, but I don't think that all of the edits that we had made it into tonight's agenda. So I'll go back in my email and forward that again to Doug and Sasha, so that we make sure that at least what we had agreed before under our current policy is used until we have a new policy.
Fair. Peter?
Yeah, so the notion of the importance of procedures and practice in this, even though it's a policy, was something we've discussed multiple times about how and should we capture that here, or should we just discuss something in addition to it, right? It's because so that section that we were thinking about deleting in the second paragraph is a perfect example where it sort of falls under this umbrella of how do you communicate with the school committee, right? And one avenue of that is public comment, and then once you get into the public comment avenue, there are the different avenues that each have their own manners. And then if it's not going to be public comment, you also have other avenues. And so, and that, if you don't see the gestalt of that, particularly if you're not used to, attending these meetings or, having done a lot of comment, it can be pretty confusing. And so we talked about different ways in which we might articulate that here, but at least I got the sense we seem to be coming back to, well, a lot of this stuff isn't policy, but we really ought to prioritize it, right? We really ought to have some sort of one whether it's a web page or part of board docs that says this is how you talk, this is how you get in touch with the school committee, and this is how you do it if you want it to be public. And by the way, even if it's an email, it's a public document. All those things that that might come up. That might have to be a living document that is refreshed every year as technology changes and whatnot. But that is definitely something that came up as an issue of importance.
Anyone else have anything to add to it? All right, so we can go ahead.
Yeah, so we'll take the changes that we did tonight and merge it into the clearest document we can. Maybe we'll ask Deb Westmoreland to do that, and we'll try and get that out sooner in the summer so that people have time to think about it.
And I'll say, just because I can't remember a name, there was a member of the public who had a whole bunch of input there that I thought there were some great ideas from the member of the public. If you could email those would be awesome to add to this. Just for that little blurb at the bottom. And move on to the FY23 budget update.
So this will be extraordinarily brief because, as I said at another meeting, it was a bit aspirational to have this on tonight's agenda. I was hopeful to have kind of crunch some numbers relative to the tentative agreement with the union and perhaps have some things before you relative to actions you'll need to take relative to sort of finishing up the fiscal 23 budget. Just a reminder, generally when we get to the end of the year, there are some adjustments of budget. You are required to transfer money between budget areas, so we keep them fairly broad. There's there's probably about 15 areas. I mean, payroll being like one big one, but I mean, there are more details as we look at the budget document. And so, not ready this evening, but nonetheless, hopefully, if there's a meeting in the short term, we'll do it then, and if not, then it'll be when you get back together in August. We'll come back to that topic of adjusting the sort of final numbers a little bit to sort of balance out the budget for the year.
Perfect. Thank you. And we can move on to future agenda planning. Stalling while I try to pull up the document. I'll take Tom and then Peter.
So a couple of timing things. So obviously we need to vote the APEA contract, assuming it's ratified by the union. So that the timing of that is to be determined. We also have another timing. So we have an OML complaint filed against this committee and Union 26, and so we need to meet on or before July 8th. To do that, we have 14 non-business days. I'm sorry, 14 business days from the time the complaint was received. And so we need to have a response back by that point. So if the ratification, if the vote for the contract that we do can happen on or before July 8th, it might make sense just for schedules to do that together. I know the other complication with planning is that we're now getting into the summer and people's in-person availability might not be the best. And so I don't know whether we want to do that meeting as virtual or in person or not, but those are just more questions than answers there.
Allison?
Yeah, on the topic of the contract ratification, I don't think we will know for sure whether, because we have a meeting scheduled or penciled in for the 27th. We won't know, what's 5 days before that? Monday, Thursday. So if we find out that the APEA has opened up voting, I think by Wednesday, is that right? So tomorrow, then that means Tuesday we could potentially be voting, but I think it might be safer for us to just assume that it's going to be later than that. And as soon as we know when they've opened up their vote, then we'll be able to peg when we can schedule that meeting and that vote. And I agree that would make sense to tie that in with the OML. I'd also like to add to that agenda, I mean, it would be a brief topic, but a meeting schedule for next year. I think it was challenging for planning. I mean, to sort of not do that until September, and including whether and if yes, when we might do a retreat. So I think those would be good topics to tackle at that last meeting.
Then, Tom, since we skipped you earlier, just want to go ahead.
How do I let you know what I would like to see on the agenda? Because I have a list of items that I would like to have us discuss.
Yeah, you can always email me.
Or now.
Yep, or right now would be a good time to.
Yeah,
or email, either way.
It's a pretty long list. I'll send it in an email. I didn't want
I
to
like that.
bring it all up, but I just wanted to know what that process was.
Yep. Yeah, you can always bring it up during these discussions, and like if you're like me and you think about these things when you're driving home, you can absolutely just email it to me.
Yeah, that's what I'll do.
Yeah, perfect.
Can I just ask, are these for the last meeting of the summer or for any time in the future?
They are for the future. They would be for the beginning of the next, I would say the beginning of the next school year. They don't have to be, they don't have to be done this summer.
All right. That
Some
works.
will take forever.
And did anyone else have any input on it? Peter?
Is it worth it just all of us saying whether we think a virtual meeting only makes more sense? I'm just looking at 2 weeks from now is the week of July 4th, and the July 4th is on a Tuesday, and I'm just trying to think of scheduling. I'm trying to make it easier on you.
Yeah, I was going to say.
And schedules, and I would hate to do important things where someone can't come because they already have a vacation scheduled, something. So.
Yeah, or they might be like running a basketball camp.
That too, yes.
Something like that. But yeah, I'd be open to having that as a virtual meeting. I don't know if anyone has any stern objections to that or anything, or tentatively.
So are we just waiting until we get more information from APEA before we can set a date for the next meeting?
Yeah, we don't know when they'll be taking their vote, and we don't take a vote until after a contract has been ratified. So we'll know. I mean, we won't know when until the vote is done. But what I'm recommending is that as soon as we know that they've opened the vote, because they typically leave it open for 5 days, that would be the time that we would schedule our meeting, so that it would be, let's say, 6 days after that.
So we're not pinned to Tuesdays, for instance. We don't have to have our meeting on a Tuesday. Okay, just checking.
I think typically, yes, we're on Tuesdays, but that's something we can talk about. But for this particular one, I think it's like it's not an emergency meeting, but I think because of wanting to get a contract ratified as soon as possible, we wouldn't wait for the next possible Tuesday.
Excellent.
Perfect. Any more input on agenda planning? All right, do we have any warrants to read?
Yes, we do. The IR of roads authorized by my signature to payables in the amount of $181,374.13 for a warrant dated 6/15/2023. This includes general fund expenses of $181,374.13. And I signed this on the 15th of June. IR of roads authorized by my signature to the payables in the amount of $0. Finally, I authorized payroll in the amount of $893.03. This was dated on the 14th of June, and I signed it on the 13th. I don't know how that was possible, but that's what it came up being. Come on. Hire of roads authorized by my signature to the high school student activities transfer in the amount of $24,677.18, and this was done on the 8th of June. Where am I? Hire of roads authorized by my signature to payables in the amount of $401,085.52 for the warrant dated 6/3/2023. General fund expenses of $401,085.52. This was dated on the 6/8/2023. You see where I am. Hire of roads authorized by my signature to the scholarship warrant in the amount of $10,350 for a warrant dated on 6/5/23 and signed on 6/5/23. That's it. Perfect. So I can't find anymore. Doesn't mean it's it, just means I can't find anymore.
Thank you.
Probably it. There weren't that
Is there somebody who would like to? Jennifer.
Read the gifts. I'd be able to.
Thank you.
I move that we accept the following. From Norma and Eva Brown, number 6478, to support Metzger Brown Holocaust Remembrance Award at $500. From David Miller, number 2975, to support Dorothy and Melton Miller Scholarship for $1,000. From Robert and Sharon Raymond, number 539, to support Excellence in Biliteracy Scholarships, $100. From Crocker Farm PGO, number 686 to support ARHS Crocker Farm PGO Scholarship for $250. From Elisa Clements, number 201, to support Excellence in Biliteracy Scholarship for $260. From Maria Luisa DeStefano and Manuel Diaz Gonzalez, number 780, to support Excellence in Biliteracy Scholarship for $140. From APHS Student Activities, number 7712, to support Spirit of Class 2024 for Class of 2023 for Class of 2024 for $500 for a total of $2,750.
Second. All in favor? That looks unanimous. All right. And I will take another. That was quick. Second. All in favor? We are adjourned.